How do you become a faster runner at the age of 42? How do you run the fastest marathon of your life at age 42? That's what I did. I went from a 5-hour, 30-minute marathoner to a 4-hour, 10-minute marathoner in the span of 1 year. I am someone who trusted the process and I got faster. And I want to tell you how I did it. By the way, I am not an athlete. I almost failed gym class in high school. I ran my first half marathon 20 years ago, and it took me almost 3 hours to finish. So I am not some sort of athlete. I do not have any God-given talent. I'm just a normal person, but I want to share this with you because I think this could really help your running or maybe just accomplishing something really darn difficult in your life. The first thing I think you have to ask yourself if you want to improve as a runner is the fundamental question, why? What is your motivation? Why do you want to become a faster runner? Because I'm going to tell you, it's a lot of pain, it's a lot of suffering to get there. I definitely had to suffer to sacrifice other parts of my life to make this happen. So the first thing you have to ask yourself is, why am I doing this? It could be for running, it could be for something hard in your life. Why are you signing up for the challenge? For me, it was really about self-improvement and learning. I'm somebody that loves learning about new things, learning about myself, and improving. And I think running is a sport that does all of these things. Running is learning. You're learning about your body, you're learning about things that you never thought you could do, and that is what's exciting for me. I also have to share that when I ran my first marathon in 2023, I thought that it would just be my one and only marathon. I said, look, if I could just run one marathon in my life, I'd be so happy. But of course, I was not satisfied. The last 10 kilometers of the race, I had to walk because I had terrible cramps in my legs and I just could not finish it in a reasonable way. And so I had this fire that was lit up. I just wanted to improve as a runner. I wanted to show myself, not to other people, I wanted to show myself that I could do this. I could take on something really hard. And this is something that I had to learn over the years doing other types of things. For example, I co-founded 2 startup companies over the period of 5 years. I wrote 2 books. I've had to learn how to do a lot of these things by doing. I'm really a strong believer that the best way to improve, to learn, is by doing. And that's what running is. Running, you gotta find your why. A big part of the why, it has to be intrinsic. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to lose weight, get healthier? Are you proving something to yourself? It cannot be extrinsic. It cannot be about wanting to prove somebody else wrong. It cannot be about wanting to be faster than someone specific in your life. It is not about comparisons. It is just about self-improvement. I think that's the only way that something like fitness or running can be sustainable. Let's face it, there's always going to be somebody that's faster than us, somebody that's faster than you. There's definitely a lot of people faster than me. And unless you are Eliud Kipchoge, the fastest marathoner in the world, there is always going to be someone faster. So you're never going to be happy or satisfied if you are comparing yourself to others. Comparison is the thief of joy. So first things first, figure out your why, your motivation, because without that, the rest of the journey is just extremely hard. Let's assume that you know your why. You're very locked into why I'm running, why I want to get faster as a runner. I would say the next thing to do is to build up your consistency and your base. So what does that mean? Well, going back to my first marathon, when I crashed and burned and my legs started cramping and I was extremely frustrated with myself, I essentially just tried to work backwards and just deconstruct what happened. Well, the number one answer I get from people that I talk to and from resources is just that you don't have enough of a strong base. When your body is not strong enough, when it does not have a strong base, you're just going to crash and burn. You're going to hit the wall. And so the very first thing I started working on I would say the first 2-3 months of the year, 2024, is just building that base. Can you commit to a quantifiable goal of running a basic amount every month? It's about discipline, it's about consistency, it's about putting in the work. So for me, I set a goal of 200 kilometers a month. Can I stick to 200 kilometers a month? Now, it doesn't have to be fast miles, it does not have to be fast pace. You just run as slowly as you want, but build up that base. Build up that habit of running 200 kilometers a month. It could be 50, 100, 150. Set a goal that is a little bit tougher than what you're running right now. Let's say that you're running 20 kilometers a month. Well, can you run 30? Can you run 50? Build it up gradually. You got to prove to yourself over a period of a few months, can I be consistent? Consistency also means that you are not trying to go all out fast. You're not trying to run as fast as possible. That's a rookie mistake. I've been there. What happens when you try to run as fast as possible every session? You just burn out. You have a higher chance of getting injured. It's not fun. Maybe you're sore the next day. You just don't want to run the next day. The very first thing to work on is consistency. You got to love it. And even if you don't love it some days because it sucks getting up in the morning to run or finding time in your schedule to run, you find a way. 80 to 90% of your runs initially when you're trying to build a base should just be about running slow. You can look up a lot of resources on this. It's really about zone 2 or zone 3 training. It's about making sure that when you're running, you're not exerting yourself too hard. Wear a watch like this. Figure out what is your heart rate. Start off by running slow. Make sure your heart rate is a manageable number. It's not a super high number. You're not exhausted. Because in the very beginning, it's just about consistency. I know I keep saying this, but you have to work yourself up to a level where you could run easy miles, slow miles every day if you wanted to, 7 days a week. And so for me, when I started getting into running 200 kilometers a month, I did not pay much attention to speed. Like I didn't have a speed workout. I didn't have a fast day, slow day. I was just running slow almost all the time. Because I'm saying that if you're a beginner runner, it's just about putting in the work. Using those legs, just getting your body used to the constant rigors of running. This is the part in the beginning where I think a lot of folks, including myself in the past, have gotten injured. What happens when you get injured? You just can't run. And what happens if you can't run? Then the consistency just stops. Figure out a way to run super slow, maybe run 2 kilometers a day if you have to. Set a manageable goal. Just get into the habit. Going back to my own experience, that's kind of what I did. For the first 2 or 3 months of the year, repetition. Running is very repetitive. Again, you have to go back to the why. Why do I want to do this? Because if you don't have a strong motivation, you will not continue. It's different for everybody. I just happen to love running perhaps a little bit more than the average person. But if you are trying to run for a specific goal of getting faster, then you're going to have to rise up to these challenges. In March of this year, after 3 months of building my base, I ran my first marathon of the year. This is where I have to say it's really important to treat races as just another day. The race is a celebration of the training. Running is not deterministic. You don't know how you're going to show up that day. Maybe you slept well, maybe you didn't rest, maybe you surprise yourself, maybe you disappoint yourself. You just have to think of this thing as a long-term endeavor. And so when I ran my first marathon of the year, this is my second ever marathon, I just had a goal of going sub 5. Remember how I said that in my first marathon, I ran it in 5 hours and 30 minutes. I basically said, hey, if I don't cramp up, if I don't hit the wall for the last 10 kilometers, no matter how slow I run, as long as I'm running, as long as I'm not walking, I will be able to run a sub 5 marathon. And at this point, I also knew by deconstructing my past performance and knowing myself, you have to also look at yourself in the mirror. What are the things that I struggle with? For me, one of the biggest struggles is pacing. I always go too fast in the beginning. It doesn't matter if it's a race or a training session, a 10K run. I'm always going too fast in the beginning, and I always end up going slower at the end. And for a marathon, that's just absolutely deadly because you're just using too much energy in the beginning. So when I started training for that first marathon of the year, I did these long runs where they were 20 kilometers, 25 kilometers, not the full marathon length, but I just wanted to make sure that I got used to my body handling longer distances. Again, it's about building that base. It's also about not going out too fast. I was very lucky for this marathon that I had a friend who paced me for the first 21 kilometers because I was running the full marathon. She was running the half marathon. We were running on the same course. She was able to run with me for the first half. She was my timer. If you have difficulties with pacing, either get really disciplined with a watch or find a friend that you can run with who can keep you honest, because that's what she did. I don't think I could be here today talking about running a 4-hour marathon if it wasn't for her. Because in that race, even though I ran it sub 5 in less than 5 hours, I think it was 4 hours and 53 minutes, without her pacing and support for the first half, I definitely would not have been able to do it. Because guess what happened? I had somewhat of an improved pace. I ran the first 21 kilometers. Towards the last half, I also started to fade. I was also struggling. My legs also started to cramp. All the things came back. It was a nightmare, but I did my best to handle that. Had to slow down a lot, had to make a lot of new mistakes. And I think that's also something that's very important in your running journey. Let's say that you're trying to do something within a year. Try to break it down to goals. It wasn't like at the beginning of the year, I just said, I'm going to run a 4-hour marathon. I said I'm going to run a marathon in less than 5 hours. And once I managed to do that, then I could work out my next goal, which is try to get faster and faster and faster. You have to figure out how to break down your goals into smaller chunks. I would still recommend that you have an ambitious goal for the year, but break it down. What can you do in the first 3 months, 6 months, 9 months? Work your way there. Maybe you don't hit the goal. You can always readjust the goal. Just be realistic, but also think big. So I reached that mini milestone. What do I have to do next? The interesting thing is that marathon was the end of March, and there really wasn't a lot of marathons happening in mainland China in the summer because it just gets super hot. And so I just went back to basics, kept on running 200, 250 kilometers a month. I did that for the next 5-6 months without even running another race because, again, it's just about thinking long-term and building that base. I also did something this year for the first time that I'm extremely proud of, which is I managed to run through the entire hot Shanghai summer, maintaining the same mileage. I absolutely hate and can't stand the heat. In Shanghai in the summer, it gets to be around 30 to 35 degrees Celsius. My body is not built to handle that. If I could choose 0 degrees Celsius for the whole year or 28 degrees Celsius for the whole year, I would choose 0 degrees Celsius hands down. My body just starts to shut down when it gets to over 25 degrees Celsius, and it's really hard for me to run. I had struggled for years with running in the heat. I think most of us do because it's just not pleasant. What did I do? I wanted it badly enough. I wanted to improve as a runner. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it under any condition. Rain, snow, heat, it didn't matter. I had to deal with it. I remember in the summer was when I started waking up at 4:30, 5 a.m. in the morning because that was the coolest time of the whole day. It might have been just 28 degrees or 30 degrees instead of 35, instead of 38. And so I found a way to force myself to run early in the mornings when it was the only time that I could manage. You got to find your own system. Some people also love to run late at night. Could also potentially be cooler during a hot summer day. It doesn't matter. You just have to find a way to fit it into your running schedule and be consistent. I'm extremely proud to say that I ran over 200 kilometers a month during the 2 or 3 months in the summer when it was excruciatingly hot. I am very happy for having done that. The third part of the journey is when I signed up for actually 2 more marathons to end the year. There's one in October and there was one in November. I think one breakthrough I had was just being consistent for 6 months out of the first half of the year. I was extremely consistent. Didn't matter what the weather was. I was always putting in the work. The other thing that was a big breakthrough, having first built that base, finally embracing a structured training plan. I'm talking about grabbing one of those marathon training plans you can find online. These marathon training plans are great because they basically just walk you through, okay, I have 12 weeks to the race. I have 16 weeks to the race. What do I need to do? And it kind of breaks it down into, okay, well, today you're going to have easy runs. Or today you're going to have a harder workout where you're going to go faster. You're going to scare yourself because you're going faster than you thought you could. And you're going to have a weekend long run. They call that long slow distance, or LSD, where you're running maybe a 30-kilometer session, a 25-kilometer session. You're really mixing it up. But I think the most important thing is you're being consistent. You're still running most days of the week, if not all the days. You're focused on recovery as well. You're trying to focus on getting good sleep, nutrition, hydration, fueling. I was very fortunate to have worked with a coach, my coach Kate. She gave me the training plan, and she also gave me some advice on how to recover, how to fuel myself during the race with gels, with water, how to train in a way that I could be ready for the actual marathon. I'm not saying that everybody has to get a certified running coach. It might be possible to just get some friends who are very experienced, who have run fast marathons, to just help you, because chances are they've all gone through some sort of plan. Even if you just have to get a plan and just follow that, I think that's still better than not having a plan. This is something that I cannot stress more strongly. I ran for years and years and years and years without a base, without being consistent. Every day I went out there for a run, I didn't know what my plan was. That's why having a plan is so important, because it gives every one of your runs some sort of purpose towards the larger goal. The first thing is to set a larger goal, like I'm going to run a marathon under these parameters, like this fast or this finish time. I think that's immensely valuable. But once you have that locked in, once you figure that out, you also need to have a plan that you could execute to get to that milestone. It's always about a structure and having a process. And as I started to tell myself this year, it's about having a process, but trusting the process. You got to trust and you got to love the process, because let me tell you, there's going to be those days where you're kind of upset with yourself because you didn't run as well as you thought you would. There's going to be those days when you get hurt and you have setbacks and things don't go according to plan. That's okay. You have to have the motivation first, and then you have to have the confidence that if you follow the process, if you trust the process, good things will happen. Honestly, that was a very exciting time, was to have a plan for the first time, because I started to see a lot of immediate gains. I was just like, what the heck? I just ran my fastest 1K this week, and then I ran my fastest 5K, 10K. It's not like improvement is a linear line. Of course not. The rush of improving when you have a base and you start building and executing on a plan in the very beginning, it's so magical. And that's what really gave me even stronger motivation on top of the motivation that I already had. I did all that for the next 2-3 months, and it's time for the next marathon, October. I was way overconfident. I felt like I was on cloud 9. I felt like I was invincible. I run my next marathon in October. I was a little beat up from the training, but I was very excited about trying to prove myself after, 6 or 7 months of not running a race. I ran a 4-hour, 30-minute marathon, so it was still 20 minutes faster than 6 or 7 months ago, and that's fantastic. I'm really proud of that, but I still hit the wall. I still cramped in my legs at the end of the race, and the mental stuff is so important, because I just started beating myself up inside during that race. It's bad to say, but I felt entitled. I felt like I deserved better, because, hey, I was putting in some months, I was putting in like 350 kilometers a month. I was training with a plan. I was getting faster. I was even following this super rigorous refueling plan, like taking a gel every 30 minutes, water, salt tablets, everything that my coach told me to do, I did. But I still hit the wall. Like, why? It was so frustrating. And despite having the fastest record as a marathoner, I still felt so deflated. But I think that's one of the things that I'm pretty good at, is I'm good at telling myself to trust the process. And I'm also very good at deconstructing and playing back what happened and what might have gone wrong. And I sort of realized that there were two things that probably caused me to run a suboptimal race. One was the fueling. I still did not replenish salt energy levels enough because I think I just sweat more than the average person, and there were just things about that I had to customize based on experience. So you have to find your own calibrated fueling plan, and that's pretty personal. So you have to figure out your own way through trial and error and the heartbreak of running a worse race than you expected and all that stuff. I think another thing is just mental. I realized something as a kind of breakthrough. After you have built up the physical base, after you have put in the work, I'm not saying that you can magically just imagine yourself to a faster finish. You still need to put in the work. But after you have that base, what becomes really important becomes psychological, if and only if you have put in the initial base building. So I felt confident that I had the base. Why was I hitting the wall? The issue was I believed that by training as hard as I did, I was not going to hit the wall. If the wall was here, I would be able to dodge it or jump over the wall or just avoid it entirely. And what I realized, listening to other people talk about their race experience, is that part of running marathons is fundamentally about expecting and leaning into the pain. Some people call that the pain cave. Some people call that suffering. Whatever you call it, you have to expect that it's going to hurt. And I'm sorry, if you want to run pain-free marathons, that's just not really a thing. Again, it goes back to your goals. If you're just trying to get as fast as possible, be a faster runner, there's nothing wrong with just running for fun. There's nothing wrong with training for health or to just say, I'm going to run 10 kilometers a week. I'm going to be healthier. There's nothing wrong with that. But be clear with yourself about what your goals are. Because for me, I realized I'm not going to be happy with just finishing the marathon. I want to be happy with being faster, exceeding my own abilities and expectations. That's why I'm doing the training. It's true that racing is a celebration of the training, but I think it's also a kind of validation of the training. I have to lean into the pain. Fresh off that marathon, I didn't do much training because the next marathon I had, I wasn't even sure I was going to run the next marathon. The marathon I just talked about was in October. The next one was in November. I had not a lot of time, maybe 5 or 6 weeks, and I just thought, I'm going to run it. I was still pretty banged up. At this point, my coach, Kate, even recommended that maybe I consider not running the marathon because I wasn't fully recovered, and there were all these factors, and maybe try to save yourself up for the next year. And I think these are all legitimate concerns. If I'm being honest with you, heading into that next marathon, even the week before the marathon, I was thinking every day, was I going to withdraw? Was I going to race it? Because there was still some soreness, some pain in my legs. I definitely was not fully recovered. It could get kind of dicey. I also know that I like to push myself, but I don't want to push myself to the point of actually getting hurt. It's like that saying, live for another day, live to run another day. So there was a lot going on up here heading into that last race of the year. But in the end, I still decided to run it just to see how I would feel and how I could process or maybe make amends for the last marathon, which was a disappointment for me. I had no change to my fitness level whatsoever. There was not really time to improve it. I was still recovering from the last marathon, but I managed to run 20 minutes faster in the last marathon of the year. That's when I finished the marathon in 4 hours and 10 minutes, 20 minutes faster. And the only thing that I did differently was just a mental game, which is telling myself at the beginning of the race, I'm going to lean into the pain. I'm going to trust the process, but the process involves suffering. And I have to be prepared to hit the wall and just deal with it. And so ironically, by thinking that way, and also refueling better, of course, I didn't hit the wall. And I ended up running the fastest marathon of my life at the age of 42. And that's where I am right now. So that's kind of my story. It's a bit of a yearly recap, but it's also just how I did it. There's nothing in here that's embellished. As I'm heading into 2025, I am trying to have larger goals for myself. Well, first I'm going to try to make a full recovery. I'm still kind of banged up from running those 2 marathons in 6 weeks, there's definitely a cost to that. Assuming I can get over that, and I want to be patient with the recovery and healing process, I do have some goals for next year. I do want to become a faster runner, but I have to remember what I learned this year. And that's kind of why I'm recording the video too. I'm hoping that I can help somebody watching the video, but I also hope that I can watch it and just remind myself, trust the process, take things slow, build the base, have a plan, have a strong mental game. Just understand that running is hard and running involves setbacks. Things are never going to be exactly what you predict they will be. At the same time, you do have the ability to exceed what you thought was physically and mentally impossible. And so that's the mindset I'm going to take into next year. I hope that's the mindset that you will adopt as well as you progress on your running and learning journey. Thank you for watching, and may you have an excellent journey of self-discovery of your own.